many of which garnered awards, including an Academy Award nomination. Wow. So you were there with Academy Awards and got to see all those people and sit in the middle of all those stars. How great is that? She has 2 Emmys and has won multiple, over 30 industrial honors. She's composed and produced music for multimedia, animated version of Stella Luna. I'll have to tell you what that is. Or do you have to tell me what that is? Which was honored by Newsweek magazine as Pick of the Year Award for the Best Children's Multimedia. She's performed nationally and internationally with the World Fusion Band, Wild Mango. That sounds like fun. And celebrated festivals, celebrated festivals such as the Monterey Jazz Festival, Aspen Jazz Festival, and Barbados International Jazz Festival. Wow. She is outstanding. She's been awarded a lot of different things. And she's here today to tell us her story, how she's journeyed through life, and I am so looking forward to that. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Erika Luckett.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's so wonderful to be here in Simi Valley with all of you and experience the power of wind. Oh my gosh. What an amazing experience. And what I'm so inspired by with wind is that wind arises through a change of pressure systems. Wind is evidence of change. And it also, it weaves so perfectly into my talk today, because wind is an expression of chaos. And it's present in all natural systems. Chaos is present in all natural systems. For any system to change, it must go through a period of chaos. Now, in that change, it can either collapse or it reorders at a higher level of functioning. It's natural. We just experienced it with the wind. Maybe some limbs broke, maybe some trees bent, but it's ever present. Now, at the same time, there's such an extraordinary expression of perfection, miraculousness, coherence, balance, communication. And that is the foundation upon which all this ever-changing world of duality, of wind bursts, arises. Where to begin? I think the best place to begin is with gratitude. I am so grateful to be able to be here right now with you in this moment. I am so grateful for the privilege of breathing, the privilege to see, to hear, to feel, to incarnate as a luminous expression of spirit encased in this remarkable vessel comprised of nearly 100 trillion cells. 100 trillion cells conspiring and communicating to provide this amazing vehicle for our incredible human experience. We are all alive and given the privilege of navigating through this extraordinary world. So let's just breathe that in. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. Now, as each one of us just breathed, our chest expanded, our diaphragm lowered. Air traveled in through either our nose or mouth, moved down our windpipe, rushed into our lungs, filled the alveoli, which transferred oxygen into our bloodstream, and in turn absorbed carbon dioxide, which it expressed back into the air. Effortless. Perfect. Beautiful. Now, if we continue that breath and see how it's absorbed by plants and trees that in turn transform it back into more oxygen, release it into the air, and that air spins around our globe through an astounding interaction of convection currents that then weave this atmospheric cocoon to hold our planet, this precious jewel, in a way that life thrives. Our planet, of course, meanwhile, is spinning around the Earth, maintaining just the perfect distance to allow life as we know it to thrive. Any closer and we would burn up. Any further and our planet would be an icy, dark, uninhabitable mass. But it's not. There's an intelligence and a perfection at play that stretches from the subatomic level to the furthest reaches of the cosmos. It's amazing. It's awe-inspiring. But what happens when that apparent perfection, that amazing interplay and balance of life, is eclipsed by an experience of chaos, of tragedy, of pain? That's the story that I'm here to share with you today. It was just a little over 2 years ago that I was in a hospital, barely able to move or breathe. I had 2 massive tumors on my ovaries, a big melon and another one about the size of a mango. And as a result of the cancer, I had amassed an innumerable collection of pulmonary embolisms and blood clots. The chief radiologist who reviewed the scan of my lungs said he had never seen such diseased lungs on a young person before. I was a lifelong athlete, a runner, a swimmer, a triathlete, a yogini. My mom was a yoga teacher, and from the time I was a little one, I was standing on my head doing sun salutations. That was as easy for me as riding a bike, skipping rope. I grew up on an organic farm for a good portion of my childhood. We ate whole foods, nothing processed. I was the picture of health. I was the poster girl for healthy living. I had a very challenging touring schedule, but every morning I would wake up, I would meditate, do my yoga practice, eat my healthy breakfast, and I was good to go. I'd never canceled any performances, and it was something that I prided myself on. I was very responsible to take care of my physical body so that I could meet the obligations of a very demanding life that I loved. I loved that I got to live a passionate life, expressing the creativity that moved through me. What a joy. But all of a sudden, I found myself in a hospital room with so much fluid in my abdomen and in my lungs, in addition to the tumors, that I couldn't even lie down to sleep. I had to sit up so that the fluid wouldn't push up against my lungs. I couldn't really sleep. But not sleeping, there was this curious mesh between dream time and waking time. At night, when everybody else was sleeping, I allowed myself to use that time to move into this realm that was deeper than just my physical being. There is, of course, our surface experience, which is physical. And then there's a secondary layer, which is emotional and energetic. And then, of course, the foundation of our being is spiritual. So when all this chaos is arising on the surface, there was something really compelling that pulled me to root into that deepest layer of my being, my spiritual nature. So all this chaos, all this confusion was really an invitation to connect to the deepest essence of myself. Now, how did this happen? 8 months before I found myself in the hospital, I started to feel a little strange, but nothing obvious, nothing I could point a finger to. It was, strange details, and it was kind of like being in a cauldron whose flame was slowly increasing, and I didn't realize that it was boiling until it was boiling. And then I was really in that critical spot. It all came to a head one day in May of 2011, May 10th, 2011. I was headed to a recording session in Sausalito, California, not far from where we live. And I made my way out to the car, and beautiful Lisa was following me, and she just said, "You don't look very good. How about if I drive you?" And I said, "No, I'm okay. I can do this. I can do this on my own." I was so, exactly, it's worth laughing about. I was so proud. I don't even know if the word proud, but I was just so accustomed to being self-sufficient, independent, and autonomous. I didn't ever want to need anybody or anything, because that was a sign of weakness, or that the idea of being an evolved, strong human being is to really not need anybody else, but to do everything on my own. Mind over matter. I didn't feel very good, but it didn't matter because I had such a strong mind. We know as metaphysicians what it is to have mind over matter and have this steely intention that if I set my mind to it, I can overcome it. So I felt awful. But I just steeled my resolve and said to Lisa, "I can do this, thank you. Don't remind me how bad I feel." So I got in the car and I drove over the bridge, and it was a beautiful day. There was sparkles on the water. And I got to Sausalito. And as I tried to step out of my car, it took every ounce of strength that I had to be able to move out of that car. And I did. And as I made my way across the parking lot, everything started getting progressively dizzier, and I felt weaker and weaker until suddenly everything went dark. I'd never fainted before, and I don't know if you have fainted and if you've had the same experience, but in my case, it was like going into dream time. All of a sudden, in this state that I didn't know was a dream, but was kind of like a dream, I was driving again. And I was on that same bridge, and my hands were clutched to the steering wheel. And I was moving across the bridge, and I felt like there was danger, and I had to keep every ounce of my focus riveted on the bridge, on the road ahead. And I heard a voice calling my name, but I couldn't pay attention to it because I knew that I needed to stay in control. I had to keep grip on the wheel in order to make it across. And this voice was calling my name, and I wanted to ignore it because I needed to stay focused and in control. Until finally, I heard that voice calling, and eventually I followed it. And I realized it was the engineer calling me to bring me back to consciousness. I needed to let go in order to wake up. I needed to release control in order to regain consciousness. There I was, flat, engineer by my side. Paramedics arrived in a flurry of efficiency. I had EEG monitors on my chest and back. They ran a battery of tests, only to say that I had had vasovagal syncope. Now, vasovagal syncope is a really fancy term to describe a very common fainting episode triggered by the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve and the one that happens to connect the brain to the heart. The connection between the brain and the heart. Little did I know at that time that that was going to lay the template and the foundation to my healing and ultimately to my survival. 3 days later, I was officially diagnosed with these ovarian tumors that had caused the vasovagal syncope because of the pulmonary embolisms and the innumerable blood clots. Doctors gave me a 3% chance of survival. I've never been one for statistics because I know statistics measure things that are rough and quantifiable, and I know that my being exists in a realm that is beyond measurement. It's infinite. So the healing journey began, and the healing journey really had to happen on all 4 levels. When I wanted to understand cancer and why cancer in the body of a really healthy woman, as I was reading, it was like, well, stop eating processed foods. Eat more fruits and vegetables. Exercise. Meditate. All right, all of that I did. So there was something even deeper calling me to action. What was it? Chaos is a breakdown in relationship. Chaos is a proliferation of cellular growth that does not serve the whole. Healthy cells are in constant communication with the whole being, with the environment, with the ecosystem. Cancer cells are completely self-absorbed and disconnected from the greater system. So I thought, all right, if this is the metaphor, let me understand the metaphor so I can heal it at that level. First thing I did was to go in and ask my tumors what they were there to show me. Rumi says, find the antidote in the venom. Find the antidote in the venom. So I thought, let me go in and ask. And I did, and it was astounding. The answer was immediate. Despair and mistrust. Despair and mistrust. And I thought, despair and mistrust? Really? Really? How could that be? I'm a positive, healthy, energetic, confident woman. Mistrust and despair? And I held it a little longer. I went in, and as I just held that space instead of denying it or rejecting it, I entered with curiosity, and a trap door lifted from my heart, and I felt the despair and the mistrust flow out. Despair and mistrust. From my earliest childhood, I knew that I was here on the planet to be an agent of good, an ambassador of kindness, an emissary of light. But I didn't trust that the world could offer that back to me. So I'd used my mind to create a remarkable shield around my heart, a protective shield that not only protected me and shielded me, but ultimately kept me disconnected from the flow of good that was always there for me to receive. So my healing began simply by releasing that protection around my heart. Now, the funny thing was that I was in such an extraordinarily compromised position, so unable to move, so challenged in my breathing, and so in being so challenged with my breathing, it was hard for me to even talk. And at that moment of vulnerability, there was no suggestion about asking for help. It wasn't an encouragement or a hypothetical. I had no other recourse. I had to ask for help. I could not do anything without assistance. My most basic bodily functions required outside assistance. And I was so grateful to have somebody there, somebody's, Lisa first and foremost, and then in the hospital room, these amazing nurses and doctors that were there to assist me. And I completely surrendered. Completely surrendered. I didn't do anything at that point. There was nothing for me to do. But I knew that at my core, my foundational essence was one of love. So instead of doing anything, I simply surrendered into love. Even though I couldn't move and I could barely breathe, I could be love. And the funny thing happened was that there in that hospital room, it became a love chamber. Everyone who was in there with me, Lisa and my mom, also operating from this place of love. And the curious thing was that the nurses would come in and they took their breaks in my room. They would sit down and just say, "It feels so good in here. It feels so peaceful." I wasn't doing anything. None of us was doing anything. It was just a matter of surrendering to that most fundamental, profound essence of our being, which is love. Now, thanks to a lifelong spiritual practice, I wasn't afraid of dying. I wrote in my journal, this is not a battle to be won or lost, a game to be won or lost. It's simply an opportunity to bring myself most fully to every moment, to learn to love more abundantly. It's not about errors, but about opportunities to adapt and evolve. That's what we're all here to do, evolve and up-level our consciousness so that we can become more transparent vessels for the divine expression to flow through us. That's all. It's so simple. Now, what had happened is that my mind had been so caught up in accomplishing and doing and the awards and do, accomplished, goal. To what end? We're here to love. We're here to be active expressions of the divine that is waiting for us simply to express the pureness of that expression, the pureness and uniqueness of that expression. Each one of us is a divine emissary. Now, we can be asleep to that, or we can wake up to it and actively bring forth that vast intelligence, that infinite love, that immeasurable light. That's what we're here to do. But so often we lose our rootedness in that, and we operate in the bare superficial layer of our physical being and then our emotional dramas. And that just distracts us from what is most fundamental, from the privilege of incarnating to express divine love. Now, in my case, with cancer, and not just with cancer, but with a 3% chance of surviving, of living, the ultimatum was really clear. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't an invitation to move from theory into practice. It was essentially evolve or die. Evolve or die. It wasn't like a cold that I could say, I'll just get a bed rest for a week and then I'll feel better and then continue the same way I've done before. or, you know, wanting to lose a few pounds and going on a diet to then return to the same way of eating or the same way of being before losing those unwanted pounds. This was life and death. Life and death, life summoning forth an expression that is greater than the smallness that was so easy for me to hold on to. Now, in my case, it was cancer. In your case, I pray that it is not cancer, but I know undeniably each of you has chaos or conflict or challenges or difficulties. That's life. That's part of the chaos. That's systems changing. My invitation to you is to rise above and remember your divine provenance. Remember that source from which you come. Remember what you are here to do, and that is to be a unique expression of the divine intelligence and love and light that is there to move through you, because without you, it doesn't have that expression. And each of you is the only one, that one unique shape that can bring through that divine voice. We never know how we're going to die. We never know if we're going to be thinking when we die, what we're going to be thinking, if we'll be thinking at all. But I had an amazing opportunity to get a periscope view into that experience when, after my surgery, the day they removed my stitches, I had a very strange and sharp pain under my heart and my chest area. And the attending physician was very alarmed because she thought that perhaps one of the clots had escaped through the filter that they placed to protect me. And there was a very great likelihood that I had 30 minutes to live. So she rushed me to the emergency room. And there they sped Lisa and me past the triage nurse. And we were in the back room waiting 30 minutes. There's not much to say. There's not much to say at all. Because the only thing that really matters is love. That was the only thing that counted, that held. That was the only thing that stood in the room with us, that not only stood in the room but lifted us and moved through us. That was the fundamental expression that said, this is all it's all about. This is the only thing that matters. This is the only thing that we are here for. This is the only thing that is for us to express. Lisa and I, we just looked at each other and smiled, like, I guess this is it. What an amazing ride. What an amazing privilege to be human, to be alive, to be given an invitation to love. Now the question is, do we respond? Do we answer that invitation with an open and present heart? Or do we shrink back in fear, in smallness, in separation, in a forgetfulness of our divine provenance? Ernest Holmes says, let love lead the way. Only love sees love, and love sees only love. So as we move through our days, as we move through windstorms and tornadoes and catastrophes and chaos and triumphs and joys and parties and celebrations and sorrows, it's all there. But the one constant is love. Remember that. Connect to it. Know it. Know it. Each one of us each one of you is that vessel for the infinite to express its love, its intelligence, its wisdom, its creativity through you and you and you and you and you and you. And isn't it beautiful? Love. Our lives depend on it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We are going to share a song off of our up-and-coming CD that we're going to be recording in December. This will be the title track, and it's called Leaning Toward the Good.
Walking a tightrope over stormy seas below, bare toes on open wire, stretched from cliffs of stone. The pull and the tug of forces still not understood. I am leaning, leaning toward the good. I'm leaning, leaning toward the good. I lay down my armor and I set down my shield. The only way across is unguarded and revealed. Each step takes me further than I ever thought I could. I am leaning, leaning toward the good. I'm leaning, leaning toward the good. I'm too young to be old, and too old not to know that I'm here for the adventure, to live fully and be bold, to find wisdom in the silence, be the silence in the fire, finding beauty in the chaos as I move across the high wire. Leaning, leaning, I am leaning, leaning, I am leaning, leaning toward the good. What is mortal in a world full of change every moment? What is lost, what is gained, will I